Throughout its history, Russian society has been split by conflicting attitudes towards the West. While some have seen Western influences and their cultivation as necessary sources of economic, political, and cultural development, the more dominant cohort, initially rooted in the values of the Russian Orthodox Church, has viewed these elements with suspicion and emphasized nationalism as the doctrine best suited to securing the nation's future. This historical struggle has manifested itself in innumerable ways, both large and small, among which the composition and subsequent revision of Tchaikovsky's Second Symphony is but one example. When Tchaikovsky entered the St. Petersburg Conservatory in 1862 as one of its first students, he found himself in the midst of an often ferocious debate about the future course of Russian music. The conservatory's director, Anton Rubinstein, believed that the nation's musical culture would only reach its potential if Russian musicians were given thorough professional training and achieved a comprehensive understanding of European art music. This vision was opposed by a group of musicians who advocated a type of musical nationalism that specifically rejected European influences, the most prominent of whom were Borodin, Balakirev, Kui, Mussorgsky, and Rimsky-Korsakov. These composers, who came to be known collectively as the Five, saw folk music as the ultimate basis for creating art music that was distinctively Russian. The conflict between these two camps also had a sociological dimension. The nationalist faction was based in the proletariat, and they believed that professional musical training was an elitist European concept that dulled originality and directness of expression, while musicians affiliated with the conservatory tended to come from the upper classes, and generally considered the Five and their followers to be little more than musical dilettantes. Although Tchaikovsky's art would become firmly rooted in the cultural values of the conservatory, he maintained friendly relationships with the nationalists throughout his career, perhaps due to a deeply shared affection for Russian folk music. He regularly played his new works for members of the Five and took their opinions seriously, a prime example being the decisive guidance Balakirev gave Tchaikovsky as he struggled to complete his Romeo and Juliet overture. Thus, in retrospect, it's unsurprising that the premiere of Tchaikovsky's Second Symphony in February of 1873 became one of the composer's great early triumphs. The nationalists heard a work replete with Ukrainian folk tunes and melodies derived from them, which inspired one critic to give the symphony the nickname Little Russian, a reference to the Tsarist epithet commonly applied to the Ukraine. And the conservatory set admired the ease with which Tchaikovsky synthesized its materials to create music that was at once elegant, immediately appealing, and technically polished. As the 1870s progressed, Tchaikovsky's music inevitably evolved. Although an ambivalent fascination with Wagner's music brought forth his turbulent, highly chromatic tone poem Francesca da Rimini, it was his growing acquaintance with French music, and in particular Bizet's opera Carmen, that had the greater impact. Tchaikovsky heard a clarity and an unaffected directness in Bizet's writing that stirred memories of the quality that made him fall in love with Mozart's music when he was a child. Such cosmopolitan influences were crucial to the formation of Tchaikovsky's mature style, in which full-throated romanticism, balanced by exquisite lucidity, is a defining characteristic. In late 1879, Tchaikovsky decided to revise his Second Symphony, hoping to render it in a form that would comport with his more fully developed aesthetic ideals. The focus of the revision, which he was able to carry out in just 3 days, was the first movement. Although he retained its introduction, its coda, and a few phrases in its development section, everything else was replaced with music that's more recognizably structured and texturally transparent, reducing the movement's length by 118 bars in the process. Tchaikovsky preserved both the second movement, which had originally served as a bridal march in a failed operatic project titled Undine, as well as the following scherzo. He revised the finale by simply excising an entire section in which the movement's principal melody, a Ukrainian folk tune called The Crane, had been subjected to extensive development, a cut of almost 150 bars that eliminates excessive repetition and restores the movement's forward propulsion. In revising his Second Symphony, Tchaikovsky created a work that differs significantly from his other 5 essays in the form. Its approximately 35-minute running time makes it the most compact of his symphonies, and the prevailing succinctness of its expressive manner contrasts sharply with the aura of epic struggle that's commonly associated with Tchaikovsky's symphonic works. His clear objective was to give the Second Symphony a structure that more appropriately matches its original content, a goal Tchaikovsky achieved with characteristic aplomb. In doing so, he transformed the symphony into a work that's as immediately engaging as any he ever wrote, a substantial piece of high entertainment that has become a perennial audience favorite.